Welcome, gentle listeners, to another episode of First Dates and Soulmates. I am your host, Nikki, and I am joined here, as always, by my lovely co-host, Meg.
Good to see you.
Meg.
Good to see you, Nikki.
Y'all, we're back for another episode of Bridgerton, but also AKA the toxic fandom, because y'all, I have so many thoughts, feelings, emotions. I feel like my threads is a Twitter. See the little joke. Meg, overall, what were your thoughts on season 3, parts 1 and 2 of Bridgerton?
I felt like the pacing was very off, and I was a little bit disappointed with the things that they chose to. Like, there are like probably 5 things that I really love about the book, and they cut out 3 of them, or like really minimized 3 of them, and spent so much more time on the external, the queen, and like shoving other storylines into it that I feel like I really missed the actual falling in love of Colin to Penelope and the unrequited love of Penelope. Their actual love story in the book is so quiet and slow, and the adaptation just made it like so urgent and everything had to happen all at once, tick tock, you know, and it lost the thread for me of what was sweet about them and what made Colin desirable. So I was a little disappointed.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
I agree with you. I think like on paper, as it were, you and I both love big interconnected universe stories, right? Like where this book goes here, and Bridgerton as a book series is definitely a big interconnected universe. So you have all of the raw materials to do a beautiful ensemble show. You know, obviously you've got the family, you've got the various side characters that have either been created for the show or elevated from the books into more regular players. So I feel like the components are there. And I agree with your thoughts on pacing, because for me, I was like, the elements were there, but I feel like the attention or the emphasis put on them was a little weird. Like, there were definitely episodes where I felt like Colin and Penelope were not the main characters of this season, and they were a side character. And I was like, no, I wanted so much more for Colin.
I do not want this much of the Featheringtons. I do not want this much Cressida. So here's what I did love. The good, bad, and the ugly. I adored Francesca. I could not get enough of Francesca. I am now reading Francesca's book, because even in Francesca's book, we don't get a lot of John. So having that quiet, subtle Francesca storyline that sort of like brought the pace down when they were trying to be so urgent with the A plot, and you had this like really sweet B plot happen. Yep. I loved Francesca and
John. So good. Definitely. They were by far, I think, you know, I was taking notes as I was watching it, and Meg has seen my notes, and I might actually put these notes in the show notes for all of you to just see
Nikki's
like my train of thought. I was like, so like one of my notes in part 1, I'm like, is Francesca just the nicest and sweetest person ever? Is this the season she'll meet John? And then going down a little bit, and they go, Francesca and John just sitting in silence is the cutest. And I was like, wait, is this guy John? Oh my God, John! Like, I love it. Again, I feel like the show had really great moments. And I feel like Francesca and John had the most beautiful moments that led, I can definitely see them putting the edges of the puzzle together for Francesca to take center stage or share a stage or share a season later. But the groundwork they laid for Francesca.
For Francesca, Eloise, and really Benedict, lovely. I thought was really well done.
Agreed.
That's 2 years off. And I feel like they spent so much time. And I like, as a writer, I struggle with this too, where it's like, how much can I put in? How many Easter eggs can I put in to set up the future? And how much do I need to focus on this couple as the present? And like my rule of thumb, because this is something that I struggle with, is like everything has to be in service to the primary couple. So you can set up the future storylines, but only in doing so, you can only set up the future storylines as they support the primary couple. And you can't always do that in a, you know, huge ensemble cast adaptation for TV that takes 8 hours. This is a little bit different than it would have been in the book, because I do think Julia Quinn does that incredibly well. Where she sets up, you know, Eloise has a lot of ink on her fingers, and then you find out that she's been writing to her future partner for the whole book before it. You know, like she's really good at those hints. But I almost feel like Shonda and the production team of Bridgerton like doesn't trust people to pick up on subtlety. They're just like, let me take this subtext and slam it over your head and like state everything out loud, but never show it. Just like have people say, oh, Colin used to be really charming, but now he's really tuned things down. And it's like, I didn't see him as charming.
You mentioned a couple different things, the five things. So, okay, talking about John and Francesca, what else made your list?
I really appreciated Violet's storyline, having a later in life romance coming up. However, knowing where we're going with future episodes, I almost wish they waited until season 4 to bring up Violet, because I think that Francesca and Violet have such beautiful mirrors of
parallels,
second chance, or not even second chance, because that would be with the same person, but later in life love, second love.
Yeah.
So I loved that. I liked the decision to make Eloise and Penelope at odds. I liked the decision to have Eloise know, so that Penelope wasn't alone. But in doing that, what they had to then strip away was any of the casual, like, Bridgerton family. Penelope's there, they're just hanging out, and that's why Penelope is more comfortable around Colin. We got no backstory of Penelope and Colin, and that to me was the missing ingredient. If you're going to have a friends to lovers, you have to show them being friends. Where is the prologue? Where is the moment that Penelope gets, like, Colin comes by on his horse and he gets covered in mud and he doesn't care, and he looks down at her and she just falls in love with him, and it's unrequited. I would have taken that entire episode with the hot air balloon and thrown it out. Take the hot air balloon budget and spend it on child actors to do that one scene, and that would have it would have been everything.
I think flashbacks actually would have been a useful device this season, because, like, if you do go back and watch seasons 1 and 2, there are notes of it, but I think when you're in the primary season, it needs to be made more explicit. Like, sure, you can hint at it, do a roundup of it, like Eloise's thing after Colin and Penelope announced their engagement. She's like, were you only ever here just for him? Like, was our whole friendship you just getting closer to him? Which was a dramatic point of tension I actually really liked, but I wanted to see more of why Eloise might feel that. Like, if she almost, like, went back and started thinking about all these moments, because then it kind of, it almost gives it a little bit more oomph and adds another layer to their drama. Although I will say, I loved when Eloise and Penelope kind of had their coming together at the end of, like, I'm still mad at you, but I realize this is a horrible situation for all of us, and we're just going to have to do what we have to do.
And I miss your friendship, right? And I think, in the book, because they don't have that tension and Eloise is still in the dark, you still have so much of the relationship with them, and then Colin's kind of stacked on top of that, versus in the show, you don't have... It's just, oh, well, we were so close, and everyone's like, well, what happened? Why aren't you close anymore? But you don't get, not until the charades moment are you like, oh, right, they had such good chemistry together. They knew each other so well. And that doesn't mean that you had to take away this conflict, but like you said, using a flashback as a narrative tool would have been great. I would have loved early on in the season having Colin say to Eloise, oh man, I really missed getting letters from Penelope. She's always written to me when I've traveled. What happened?
Because when he pulls out all the letters that he saved from her at the end, in
episode 8, that should have happened in episode 6 or 5.
Here's an interesting thing, and I think this goes back, production companies have talked a lot about this. Critics have talked a lot about this in terms of TV shows in the age of streaming. That, is it more important to make something bingeable? Or is it, is this actually a place when weekly releases make sense? Now, there are a lot of, like, Netflix originals that kind of, will either release all of them at once, or they'll release weekly, or they'll do what season 3 did in a part 1 and part 2. And the benefit to putting things out all at once is there's a lot of discourse very, very quickly, but ultimately things fade off quicker because you're not waiting for the next one. If you release them weekly, people can kind of get it, like, I want the next one. And part 1 and part 2 is like, pros and cons. I actually would have preferred if season 3 had been released weekly. Don't do part 1 and part 2, because I feel like the processing time and the build in between episodes, there are certain things you forgive in a narrative structure when something is weekly, because you don't really remember, and character development, like, the timelines can be a little bit more fluid in terms of, first I thought this and then I felt that, when it's on a weekly release schedule. So I think this one should have been released weekly, as well as some, I just wanted to, like, cut and paste certain sections from episodes and be like, this needs to be in episode 3.
Yeah.
You know what? This can go to this. And I wanted to do like a little bit of cutting and pasting. Because if you look at, looking back at my notes for part 1 and part 2, the 2 parts in my mind are very tonally different.
Totally. Completely different
almost
stories.
like they were completely different seasons, rather than, because if I look at, part 1 of the season, we have Colin in his fuckboy phase, like trying to be all devil may care, trying to be a rake, trying to be his 2 older brothers. You have all the debutantes, you have Eloise and Cressida being like, gossipy and whatever. You have the Mondrich's whole storyline of their son becoming Lord Kent and kind of ascending into the aristocracy. You have parties. You have, oh my gosh, what's the name of the guy that
Lord Denham? Debden?
Debney.
Sure.
See, I can't
blonde beard guy. Yeah.
Who's barely even mentioned in part 2, because it's like the tone completely shifts.
Well, because
almost like it was 2 different
because
seasons.
the trope shifts. It switches from like almost like a My Fair Lady into a secret identity. Right? Because it starts with Penelope's a wallflower and Colin might feel bad for her, so he's gonna coach her, and then he falls in love with her, like it's very, it's like not quite Cyrano de Bergerac is the one that's also coming to mind, even though that's more like, whispering, but like the coaching and then the love triangle, like I didn't mind it, especially since we didn't have that time with Eloise, having Colin and Penelope have like a secret relationship. I think it could have been 2 or 3 episodes. I feel like it stretched too long, and like then it ended so abruptly in order to get them into the carriage, which like hot as hell. Okay. But
yeah, I agree. But I would like to take this moment to shout out Nicola Coughlan and Luke Newton. Honestly, their entire press tour has been fabulous. But the thing that made my day, and I shared this on my social media and I have now adopted it as part of my own language, is when she was on the press tour. I don't remember where she was, but they asked, like, basically, don't you feel brave for having like nude scenes or doing these sex scenes? And she goes, I know it's really hard for women like me with perfect breasts. Just like,
I mean, she does.
She's like, yes, we women of the perfect breast society. I was just like,
she really did have great tits. I definitely thought that.
Fabulous. So actually, this is something that made me laugh as I was kind of making my notes, is I fast forwarded through every sex scene.
I don't like watching sex on, like, I will read the hell out of a sex scene, but like, I don't know.
I cannot watch it. Like the mirror scene, I was like, okay, I'm like, this is the mirror scene, this is happening. I'm like, yeah, they look really hot. I'm just gonna 10 seconds.
Like
ahead,
when it was like, I'll just touch your lip for 40 seconds. And I'm like, can we just get to the point here? I know sex is gonna happen here.
What is it about seeing this and versus reading it that gets like really squicky? Even like Benedict's weird.
Oh, let's put a pin in that, because I have thoughts about that too.
Adventure. We're gonna come back to this.
But yeah,
even that, I was like, are we trying to hit like a nudity quotient
or like a threesome quotient?
Like, let's show one male butt, one women's
it's like
breasts,
bingo,
one act of coitus. Like honestly, I feel like there's like a sex bingo card sometimes with Bridgerton that it felt more not necessarily in service of the narrative, more like this is titillating, and this is what season 1 was known for with Daphne and Simon, which made sense for their storyline. And then when Kate and Anthony's season had none of it, because again, it made sense for their storyline. That this one, again, talking about inconsistencies in tone and being really spread out, was almost like a spray and pray version of sex on screen. It was very
can we not use
me,
spray and pray version of sex?
Is
gross.
Yes, thank you. That visceral reaction.
It was a golden shower of sex scenes. Like, let's not.
The innuendos are bad. God. The innuendos.
But no, I agree. Bad. It was just like, it was almost more like a bingo card. It was like, oh, can we get a threesome into episode 3 and 5 and 8? And can we also like, let's get like a, finger bang here, and it like let's get a male butt, let's get a female boob. Like, it very much felt like, I mean, yes, there was certainly tension, there was certainly growth within their relationship. I understand that they need to have the sexy scenes, but me personally, like you said, I would rather read it, because I think then you can imagine it however you want to, versus like, I feel like it's almost voyeuristic to watch. And it's different than porn too, because you don't know people in porn. There's no like plot to porn. I mean, if there's a plot, then it's not doing porn correctly. But but like in a movie format, often it gets cut off or it's whatever, and I appreciated that they gave the full sex scene, but I was also just like, this is not me. This is not what I want for my TV. I want the tension, but I don't need the, oh God, I was about to say release.
We're just full of the innuendos today. So what this actually kind of just reminds me of is there was a news article I saw years ago. I think it might have been in the New York Times. It was when Ali Wong's, like, it was her second or third Netflix special came out, like her hour-long special. And it was talking about how smart comedians set up their specials and how each special is a loop of callbacks, right? Something gets introduced here, something builds on it, you change things, and then like 10 minutes later, you actually circle back to the first one. So they showed almost like this timeline image. And it had all of these circles and things like this goes back to here and this goes back to here. And it's like, surprise, that thing I mentioned in half a second at the beginning is actually going to set up the big joke that ends the special. And it was really smart. When I look at this season, it feels like all it was trying to do was set up the next seasons and lay ground for Easter eggs that aren't paying off and do contribute to the disjointed feeling of the narrative. Because again, it means that Penelope and Colin barely got their time. But next season, they haven't announced who they're focusing on in season 4. People are making guesses, but they haven't announced it. But it feels like they've set up, the Mondriches get to do things. The Featheringtons are going to get to do things. Eloise is going to get to do things. Benedict is probably going to get to do things. Cressida is probably going to be involved in Benedict's season, laterally. Violet has got her thing with Lord Anderson. Like, it's almost like we're so focused on setting up the next season than actually executing a great season. I would rather them just do a really good season now, because the narrative itself is going to lend itself to being more spread out. Eloise and Francesca are off to Scotland, right? Anthony randomly in India.
I think they were just like, we don't want to pay these actors anymore. Let's get them off the books.
Well, it's also unfortunately, just because Jonathan Bailey, who plays Anthony, he was filming Wicked while he was doing season 3. So he's very busy. So I get, and that's really why he and Simone Ashley, who plays Kate, weren't in this season that much, which again really affects the interconnected universe. Like the fact that Daphne was not mentioned at all. Like, she does not live that far. Like, Hastings House is not that far from London. If anything, they could have just said she's in confinement, right? She's pregnant again. She can't leave. Totally valid thing to not do it. But the fact that she was not even mentioned, like, come on, Shonda, give us a dialogue.
Yeah, line. Anthony as a character is the Viscount, right? Like, he cannot just take off to India for a year because they want their baby to understand the culture. And also, like, listen, I've been pregnant twice, okay? I didn't even want to I got nauseous on a plane for 3 hours. Put me on a boat for 3 months? Fuck, no.
That one felt a little weird. We talk about this all the time with adaptations broadly, is what do we keep? What gets adjusted to kind of fit more with now? And what has to be adjusted to make sense for TV? Yes, it is a fictional version of Regency England, and we are to suspend our disbelief with so much of it. But I'm like, the Viscount leaving when his wife is pregnant with his heir. And when all of this is happening with his family, like, in Anthony in the books is very much like he is a powerful man.
He is the patriarch of that family.
Yeah,
and he takes it really seriously. And even like they had some lines where Kate was like, "Oh, your mother can continue to be the Viscountess." No, that is not how that works.
No, technically, like after Anthony would get married, is Violet would move out of the family house and into like a dowager home. So again, we can change storylines, etc. But like, again, for something that is meant to be this huge interconnected family thing, for them to be so absent, for Daphne to not even be mentioned. Although I will give them this season was a really great collection of moments. Eloise and Benedict on the swings, calling back to season 1, being like, "Yeah, we haven't done this in a while, have we? What's up?" Like
those were my favorite moments. Was the quiet moments between the family members. It was oh man, that scene where Francesca and John have just gotten engaged and they're trying to announce it to everyone, but Benedict and Hyacinth and Gregory are just like
they're
fighting over macarons.
Fighting over macarons.
And like nobody pays attention. Like that to me was Like everyone, you can
So good.
tell, so much of the dialogue was like, oh, Francesca likes to be by herself, and Francesca likes to play piano on her own, and Francesca doesn't want to go to the party. But that scene carried more weight to me in terms of Francesca's role within the house and why she would want to why she would want to go to Scotland and have that quieter life than
Mm-hmm.
all of that commentary about Francesca at being so
100%.
quiet and just
They're
different.
so good at these small moments. The other ones I really liked in part one of the season, there was Lady Danbury and the
Mm-hmm.
Queen, kind of like chit-chatting because we got to see where their friendship started in the Queen Charlotte series. And that was so, we knew in season 1 and 2 that she was like a confidant of the Queen, but we didn't know why. And to see how great their friendship was in Queen Charlotte. I love them having that moment of like talking about the diamond. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously it is very much like monarch and subject, but there is like that extra layer. Or the one that made me honestly so happy was Lady Danbury and Violet. When she's, that kind of subtext of like, I'm kind of interested in your brother. Cool. You do know I slept with your dad, right? Like, but it was so sweet. And they're like, no matter what
And I
happens
know
with my
that,
brother or
yeah, I know that
otherwise.
you're my friend no matter what, and I mean, best
Exactly.
friend's brother is my trope. So, I love that one
Yes.
because I feel like there's so much
It was
so much that you
so
have to like tiptoe
cute.
around and you still have to maintain the friendship. So having that, and I
Mhm.
think they should have played with that more. That me if we're going to have Violet in this season doing best friend's brother and we have Penelope doing best friend's brother, like let's make some parallels here about the
Yeah.
secretive way. And I loved when Eloise said to Colin, like, or said to Penelope, is this why we've been friends all this time? Because it does kind of have that vibe of you were my friend first. And we were
Mhm.
supposed to be spinsters together. And now you're engaged to my freaking brother? Like I loved in the book because Eloise wanted to be happy for them, but then she felt like a third wheel. And that's why she, went off and did her book, which I did not love, by the way. But
Mm.
like, boring kids, ew. But
Says the mother.
that's why, right? Is because I don't want to
Yeah.
deal with bratty 8-year-olds. I have bratty 8-year. Well, he's 9. I don't want to read that in my romance. Gross. Um, but like, I want to escape in my romance. I don't want to deal with bratty kids in my romance. That is a complete side rant. But I missed that, like those interconnected pieces.
Yeah.
They didn't have to be heavy-handed. They could have been
Mhm.
subtext, but I feel like all that we got was like Eloise glares, Eloise looks sad, Eloise talks to Cressida. It was never like, oh, I feel like I'm losing my best friend.
Mhm. Especially when so much of their relationship in season 1 was them kinda going back and forth. Like, Eloise, it's a scene when they're walking through Mayfair, and it's just like, "Oh, I wanna go we can't go to a university, and we can't do this, we can't do this." And, like, her and Penn, like, really wanting to support Eloise, but also just really wanting everything that Eloise is talking down on, which was great, which is why I really liked how Eloise at the end said, "Hey, Francesca, I feel like I should go with you because I've never been out of my family. And I feel like she needs to grow without the influence of one, her family, and two, the society that she's a
Yeah.
part of. Because, like, I really like the storyline with Cressida at the beginning that she's just like, you know what? I'm going to do this. And some of that was retaliation against
Mm-hmm.
Penelope, like becoming a part of the society that Penelope would criticize as Whistledown, but also realizing, yep, yeah, I really don't like this. Yep, I was right. I detest all of this. So her saying, I need to go, I was like, yes, Eloise, you do.
Mm-hmm.
Get out because your perspective is so limited, yet you pronounce things from your limited perspective that, like, yes, please get out of your house. Go to
Go to
Scotland. I
Scotland
was
with
so happy.
Francesca and John, especially since Francesca's gonna need a friend.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to move over to what I earlier referred to as the toxic fandom
Please. Because
of
I don't pay
this
attention to that.
season.
So give me like a rundown of how you think the fandom influenced the screenwriting and adaptation.
So, the fandom is always going to complain about
Everything.
things. That's not who I pictured for this. I can't believe you cut out this scene, you know, and there's always been things that have been either vaguely or outwardly racist, homophobic in the fandom. So I actually didn't watch part 2 up until a couple of days ago. I had to wait a couple of days after it came out because the same day that it released is when the fandom went batshit crazy. So the change I'm referring to is gender swapping Francesca's love interest into John's cousin, Michaela.
Michael to Michaela.
And I will
yes.
admit, yes, I will admit when I read that, I went, oh no. Like, because I think I said on the other Bridgerton episode that we did, Francesca and Michael's book is my favorite. Like their relationship is just like the yearning in it is like yearning is one of my favorite tropes. Like, we are like, there is love and can't talk about it. And so when I first heard that they had gender swapped, my immediate thought was, oh, I hate this. I hate this. This has ruined it for me. Like, Eloise being, I want to like, yes, please give us queers some spotlight. Right. Thank you. But I was like, Eloise, you've laid the groundwork for it. Benedict, you've laid the groundwork for it. It felt like something ruined it for me. Like,
and I want to also speak to that. I want to speak to that really quickly because, like I said, I'm currently halfway through Francesca's book, in part because you were like, it's the best. And I'm curious to see what they do because so much of Michael's character is I stepped into my cousin's life. I had to take over the earldom. And I feel guilty that I've taken over so much of his life as if I caused it so that I could get his wife, right? Like, so if you don't have that as part of the conflict and him being the Earl and Francesca wanting a baby, like so much of that it's inherently heterosexual. So I agree with you that if Eloise had been queer, I would have been like, yeah, and like Benedict is queer. Like I'm cool with the queer representation. Yeah. It didn't have to be Francesca.
It's been weird because I have, obviously my threads went nuts. I've been reading all the articles because I didn't want to just be like, oh, no, it's not Francesca. And, we want to have queer representation because obviously queer people existed in Regency England. I was like, but why did they pick this storyline? And obviously, because of the gender swap, there's so much like misogynoir that's come out of this, like the fact because Michaela is a Black woman too. Like it's just this toxic fandom is going fucking nuts. And I think it's disgusting. I feel so bad for the actors because, the same thing happened with the Romeo and Juliet revival in the West End that has Tom Holland and I forget the woman's name who plays Juliet. She is a Black woman. And when she was cast, the hate that the show got in the West End and this actress was disgusting, so much so that the production company had to come out and say, like, get fucked. But as a result of it, the show sold out and now it's going to Broadway with her. So, like, good. But it's like, so that's there. And obviously you don't want that to happen. And I have been reading like more about different people's opinions who are very pro the gender swap. And it's things like, like, infertility is one of Francesca's issues. How is she going to navigate that storyline with a woman? This idea of when she first meets Michaela after her wedding and she has like that stumbling over her words, which is exactly how Violet described it when she met Edmund. Like, great. I still would have wanted Michael because of exactly what you said, stepping into his life and taking over things. But I've also read that, hey, like during this time, Scotland was much more liberal. Like women could own land in Scotland at the time. So it could be, are they going to change the rules of this universe where a woman can inherit the title? They've kind of laid a little bit of groundwork for that with the Featheringtons and that she like wrote that, one of her daughters, still son though, could inherit the Featherington estate. Are they going to make that so that in Scotland, a woman can inherit the title, in which case Michaela would become, Earl of Stirling, Earl of Kilmartin. I don't know. Like, are they just like how with one marriage, they elevated Black folk and brown folk to the level of white folk in Regency. Are they going to do the same with queer people? Because based on what we've seen with Benedict's storyline, queerness is still very much like, we don't talk about this. This is not so good. This is bad. Because they had that artist in season 1 or 2. He's like, yeah, I love him. We can't be together publicly. So we must do each other in silent. Then I'm like, so if you've laid that groundwork for how queerness is seen in this version of the universe, how are you going to change it with Michaela? Because I would hate to see Francesca have to be cloistered.
Yeah.
And like never out in public with a gender swap spouse. I would also hate for Francesca to be like, well, they just lived, how they did with queer folks in older books. Like they were best friends and
yeah.
roommates and bachelors forever, right? I don't want that for Francesca. So I'm feeling overall very conflicted about it personally for the storyline. But what I am hating even more is the fandom's reaction to it and being a bunch of twats. That's my opinion on that.
I think I even because I hadn't started reading Francesca's book. And so at the end of part 1, I sent you a text and I was like, oh my God, I want Francesca to be queer so badly. Cause they set the breadcrumbs for it. And now knowing what I know about what's coming in her future, I'm like, no, they had other options. And I'm not like, I'm very pro queer. I just don't want that character.
Yeah. I know. It's a weird place to be in. It reminds me almost of like when Ocean's 8 came out. I know this is a weird parallel, but like when Ocean's 8 came out, it did not do well at the box office because it was a bad movie. Ocean's 8 was not good. It was not good. But they were like, look, women, we made this for you. Don't you want it? And you're like, same thing with the Ghostbusters.
I was just going to say Ghostbusters, yeah.
Right. Like we made this for you and it didn't do well. So clearly, movies with female leads don't work because they didn't do well. And it's like, so you feel like you kind of have to support it just so that you can get a good one. I don't want that to be the case with the queer storyline. Again, I'm feeling
it happened in the same episode as a queer threesome. Okay. Like it's not like this is the only representation possible. It's not like this is the only character that they could have this gender swap with. Like
I was like, I want, like, with Eloise, like we've already been introduced to her book partner. It's Sir Philip Crane, who's currently married to Marina. We met him in season 2. I don't know if they're going to still go with her. Like if they hadn't already introduced him in that storyline, I'd be like, let's get Eloise because Sir Philip Crane, I believe he's only a baronet. Like he's not high up in the peerage by any means. So I'm like, can we get like a woman in disguise or like a trans character for Eloise? Like that again would make more sense to me. I also think I'm just very protective of Francesca and Michael because it is my favorite story. But again, I think it goes back to this your overall feelings about adaptations in general. Is it important for it to be by the book, literally? Is it important to, play within it, kind of keep the main beats, but this character becomes white, this character becomes black, but it doesn't, ultimately change things? Or is it more like we want to play only with the themes and how we build those themes is completely up to us as the creator? And that can involve a gender swap. I don't know, Meg. I'm very conflicted about this today, but I'm angry that there isn't nuanced discourse happening about this. Instead, it is, you ruined it with your woke agenda, and this was just you trying to make a point, and you, I'm getting, no.
And like, gender swapping aside, like, I'm intrigued to see what they do with that storyline, but we can't lose the overall, like, just taking these characters and doing whatever you want with them. It's like taking dolls and putting them to Barbie Dreamhouse and doing whatever you want with them versus following a story. Like, we don't just want the characters and then we move them around however we want to. I feel like you still want to have some connection to the source material. Otherwise, it's not an adaptation. It's fanfic.
Yeah.
And
actually, that's a good point. It's like an AU fanfic.
Right. And that's kind of how it feels a little bit, is like, I'm going to take your characters and I'm going to do whatever I want with them. And guess what? Hermione and Draco are getting together. So, and I love Hermione fanfic. So do not get me wrong. But it's fanfic. It's not canon. It's not adaptation. So like knowing what your goal is with it, is it an adaptation? At which point you need to keep those core beats in place. And yeah, you're going to lose scenes and you're going to draw out different characters and you're going to need to work around your filming schedule. But at the core of it, you still have to tell the story that's in the book. I don't know how they're going to do that for Francesca. Agree. I think they, like we've already said, there are plenty of characters they could do it with, but I don't know how they're going to do that.
Yeah, so it makes me think of, on an episode of the Fandom show, Kaya and Stephanie were interviewing Jocelyn Getty of I Hate It But I Love It, and they were talking about musical flops, and more specifically, Jocelyn was talking about Carrie the Musical and Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. And she was talking about how in Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, it seemed there was almost an embarrassment of the source material because they kept Julie Taymor, who created the Broadway version of The Lion King, was like, oh, it's not just going to be Spider-Man. It's going to be Spider-Man along with the Greek myth of Arachne. And there's going to be a geek chorus. Like, and Jocelyn's point in that episode was it almost speaks to an embarrassment of the genre. Like, why can't the comic book story just be a comic book story? Like, slightly absurd, like for whatever generation or edition of Spider-Man that was. And as I finished the show yesterday, I kind of thought the same thing, because when we think about Shonda Rhimes, powerhouse in TV, but her shows are known for almost being absurd with the level of drama. Like Grey's Anatomy is, I think, probably the primary example of this. So a lot of the drama or like the tension seemed almost like what I would refer to as like Shondified drama, that in some ways strikes me as a lack of respect or embarrassment of the source material. Because don't get me wrong, romances have tension, they have arguments, they have bad things happen, but there is a trust and a knowing that it will end up okay. At this point in time, I don't know if I trust that's going to happen. Right? I think it has to, because from everything I've read, they have said that Julia Quinn has said that one of her things for this adaptation was that all characters had to end up with their counterpart in the books, although Michaela getting gender swapped. Like, that was one of her things. But I'm like, is this going to be a Grey's Anatomy type of thing where like someone's going to almost die and there's going to be all this tension, and there's going to be these big breakups, so that the endings don't feel happy, they feel bittersweet and hard won in a way that is not satisfying or romance? So that is the big question in my head right now, is do I actually trust that at the end of the day, people are going to get a happy ending? Because that is what I watch romance for. That is what I read romance for. And at this point, I do not believe that that is going to be true for everyone.
And I want there to be a happy ending, but I also want there to be stakes. Like, I want there to be consequences. And I know we've been talking a lot about Francesca and setting up all the things for season 4, but I think my biggest disappointment of season 3 was the complete lack of consequences for Lady Whistledown's unveiling.
Oh yeah.
Nobody cared. It's been building for 3 seasons, and then Penelope stands up and she's like, hi, sorry if I hurt your feelings, but I did it anyway. And they're like, okay. That was it.
So remember that thing I called you on your shit? So sorry, but guess what? It's only the bad things I said about people. And then they show like so-and-so. I could have said that so-and-so hits his wife, and I could have said so-and-so didn't pay his debts. And
that nuance was also missing. Right,
down.
That nuance was completely missing. One of my favorite moments of the book, and it could have been just slid in there with a little bit of dialogue, is a conversation between Lady Danbury and Penelope, where they're at the Smith-Smythe like concert.
Musicale.
Yes. And the music is terrible. And somebody says, Lady Whistledown's going to say that this music is terrible. And Lady Danbury's like, no, she won't, because these people are working really hard. And Lady Whistledown never criticizes the kind of the lower power people. She never criticizes people who are working really hard. She saves her criticism, and she saves that for people who are misbehaving in order to call them out. And because there was so much blow up in the previous seasons. And then like the worst thing that she said all season is like, Colin seems like he's trying too hard. And then all hell broke loose. And that was it. That was it for the whole freaking season. And I was like, either she has to be more biting and piss more people off, or we need to recognize that she does have compassion in her writing. And then when Cressida comes out and calls out the Bridgertons, that's when everyone knows that Cressida's faking it, because Lady Whistledown would never be that harsh. And it's not just the Bridgertons. It's that she had standards. And that nuance of Penelope towing this line was completely missing. It was just, well, Lady Whistledown's clever but mean. Like, that was it.
Yeah. So let's talk about, this is where I do kind of want to like talk about a little bit of comparison between the book and how this is done. And I think they made some smart changes. So, in the book, like in the show, Cressida claims to be Whistledown. And Penelope's like, no fucking way you're claiming what I worked so hard to do by the person who is like my nemesis. No. So she writes the article. It says, no, she's not Lady Whistledown, how dare you? And she uses a line in that
It would break
article
my
that
heart.
mirrors what she had said to Cressida. So Cressida immediately is like, I know exactly who Whistledown is. But the reveal of Whistledown is done by Colin. So, Colin finds out that it's Whistledown and he writes all the letters to people, and they're at a ball, and he gives this big, he gives this big toast, and he says to my wife, Penelope Featherington, although you might know her from another name, my, Lady Whistledown. And then Lady Danbury starts the clap, then it's Anthony, then it's Simon, and then it's the audience. And they describe it in the book as like, the Ton would probably be offended later, but for now they kind of reveled in the fact that someone was able to kind of pull this over on everyone for so long. But it's Colin that announces it.
Because Colin is proud of her.
That's the bit I was missing. I do like in the show that Penelope is the one that reveals it, but Colin didn't even come up to her and like hug her at the end of it, or like didn't stand behind her. Like he didn't have to talk, because I do like it was Penelope was like, I liked that she stepped up and claimed that it was her, but we missed the support of Colin in that moment. Like it felt like she was just left on stage at the end, like,
and then there were butterflies
like that. Okay, I do love the butterfly moment. The bugs, Riley, the bugs. Right? So, okay, how do you feel about the reveal? Because I do like that they gave Penelope her moment to be the reveal, but it lost some of the romantic punch by Colin not visibly displaying his pride in front of everybody else. That's what I missed.
Like you said, I kind of want to just take the scenes and re-edit them. Okay, what I would have done if I were the editor, if I were like in the dark room staring at a screen forever, is I would have taken that conversation, or, screenplay adaptation or whatever. I would have taken that conversation with Colin where he says to her, you are inseparable from Whistledown. And I went back and I read your letters because I kept all your letters because they matter to me, and your writing has mattered to me for so long. And I recognize that this is part of who you are, and I love you for your wit and your observation skills. And I've always loved that about you, and I can't take that away from you. So I'm going to support you in coming forward. If that conversation had happened 10 minutes earlier in the thing, I would have felt completely different about her standing up for herself. And because I do like her taking the responsibility. I like it in the books because we have the internality, because we have their relationship that's so much stronger, that her being celebrated by the Bridgertons feels very different.
Makes sense.
But in this moment, I wanted that conversation with, and then like after she talks to the Queen, and then the Queen's like, it's fine, no big deal. Then she's like, Colin, if you want an annulment, you can get one. Like, no, Colin would have wanted the
like, she doesn't
he would have wanted the annulment if he thought that they were going to get censored by the Queen. So like, there's no stakes, and then she offers it to him. Like, again, these conversations are important, but they happened in the wrong order.
Yeah, I agree.
And another thing that I really missed about the book, and I think they mentioned it, but they didn't show it, is Colin being jealous of Penelope's writing success and being worried that his manuscript wouldn't have an audience and wouldn't get that acclaim. And Cressida said it. Which, like, Cressida has no knowledge of what's happening in Colin's world. And she's like, you're jealous because she has an audience. And I'm like, no, that should be Eloise saying that, or that should be something that he recognizes in like a meeting with the guys of like, my wife has, people adore her writing and no one's going to like mine. And there's jealousy and there's fear about publishing, and she can help me with it. Like, that entire plot line was just gone. And I loved the two of them appreciating each other's writing styles. All they had was like, he got a cut on his hand, that scene. But even then, she was reading about the French women, and what the original book was like, it was him sitting in front of a lake, and it was beautiful.
Yeah, because in the book he ends up publishing multiple novels. It's like an Englishman in Cyprus, an Englishman in Greece, an Englishman in Scotland. I do wish they had brought in more of his writing and really kind of played up the fact that because his role within the family is he never felt that he had a purpose. Because you had Anthony being the Viscount. He's not even the second son. He is the third son. Benedict at this point he's done his painting. He's done these other things. And Colin's like, well, I don't really have anything special about me. Daphne's married to a duke. Like, what's my thing? I do like to travel. Penelope encourages me to publish these writings and I don't feel great about it. She's helping me edit them. And then I find out that she is a famous writer. And I am artistically jealous of her. But then he comes to support her. I agree. Again, I feel like their relationship wasn't given as much screen time. And that was something they had to literally cut for time.
Yeah. And if you were going to cut for time, don't cut the A plot. I could have done with a lot less Mondridges. I could have done with a lot less Queen. And like they trotted. Okay, we can talk about this too, because I feel like this is my biggest problem with the season. I feel like the Queen should be used sparingly to really bring high drama, but she showed up in 6 of the 8 episodes. Yeah. Because it was every ball. She just like, whoop, I'm gonna pop in. Whoop, I'm gonna come to their wedding breakfast and kick everyone else out, even though there's no conclusion to this. Like they overuse the Queen, and I think just like a little bit more restraint. Because I think she's a great character. I think the actress is incredible.
I love Golda Rosheuvel. Like I love her, but I agree. Like more sparing,
and like the whole.
I think it's because she is so popular. They wrote
into her, and I think they shouldn't have, even if they still paid her the same amount. Because when you have the whole premise of the reveal of Whistledown is Lady Danbury's a little bit eccentric, and she's part of the aristocracy, and she's bored, and that's why she gives the reward. Not the Queen sends out a royal proclamation because she's jealous. Like it just felt like. I think the intention was to raise the stakes and to raise the drama, but what it did is just made it seem silly when there were no consequences.
I think, again, going back to this feeling I have about respect for the genre is sometimes the stakes can be very small, but that does not play well on TV. Yeah. There needs to be bigger stakes, bigger things, bigger turns. It's like when we think about in live theater, you got to play to the back row. Like everything has to be amplified. So I feel like tonally,
but I think you can still have subtext. You can still have nuance. You don't have to bring the biggest character in every time. Because she chews the scenery. She takes and she's intended to do it, but it loses the depth, and it loses its importance when she's there all the time.
Yeah, I agree. Although I do love seeing her wigs. The motorized swans in her wig.
Or that one that had like the big hole in the middle, and I was like, I couldn't pay attention to anything else.
There were swans cycling in that hole. It was ridiculous. Okay, so I want to talk a few notes on just things that are being set up for the potential of next season. One of which is Eloise leaving. So she's not going to be around her family. So she's probably going to have a little bit more freedom. Whether or not she still ends up with Sir Philip Crane, or if this next season is like her transition season, who knows? But like that's there. Benedict, Tilly, and her male partner, whose name I can't remember. Paul. It actually kind of made the one thing I liked, again, the timing of it and the emphasis I think was off. But when she kind of says, "Hey, what about just you and me?" and he's like, "Honestly, you know what? I'm not ready to commit to anyone just yet." And then he also says at the end, "Oh yes, I'll be back for Mother's masquerade ball." He meets Sophie at a masquerade ball. So I have a feeling that's at least coming next season, which is very nice. So I feel like they've kind of laid some of the groundwork. Of course, there's Violet's additional storyline potentially with Marcus Anderson. There's all these things, but and then there's obviously Michaela with Francesca, and who knows what the timeline on losing John is going to be, because he does die of I believe it's an aneurysm. In the book originally. So, a lot of stuff going on, but I do want to end this episode before we go into our close with a little bit of a high note. And I mentioned some of my favorite moments from this season. Please. Again, moments were really in this. Inserts himself where? The Featherington sisters did not come to play this season. Honestly, they had some of the best moments this season between inserts himself where and Varley, the bugs. Like, loved it. I believe that Portia is like Kris Jenner, honestly, for her girls. She is like hustling for the girls. I like it. I also really liked John's wedding speech, because he is such a quiet man. And when he was saying that, when I look at Francesca and I see her goodness and her kindness, and I see everything in that reflected in my mother-in-law, I'm like, how could Violet not like John?
Except
Violet, he's just quiet.
Except Gregory and Hyacinth got lumped in and forgotten. He was like, I see Anthony's this and Benedict's this, and then Gregory and Hyacinth are fine. I was like, come, there's 8
Honestly,
of them.
He probably
Come
wouldn't
on.
be spending too much. He wouldn't be spending too much time with him. But
no, he would spend more time with them than with anyone who doesn't live in the house.
But no, like, but John going out with the brothers and really being the brother-in-law, I thought was some of the sweetest moments. Like when they're at Mondrich's club and it's the last night and they're all just like chilling as bros. And then John, again, who doesn't talk, he's like, oh yeah, grand gesture. You know what though? I see another bottle. Let's go get that other bottle.
I win.
Or like when he's doing the toast, like some of the best moments were small family moments. Anthony lying on Kate's belly in bed was super cute. I just really enjoyed some of those moments. Do you have any highlight moments from the season, Meg?
I did really love their first kiss. I feel like they did such a great.
I don't want to die without being kissed one.
And I mean, it was very closely adapted from what was in the book, which I adored that scene, especially when she says thank you. And he's like, thank you. You shouldn't like, thank you. And he pulls away. Like there's so much tension in that moment. And he realizes so much in that moment. And I loved, I think to me, it was that Francesca and John really stole the show. Everything about them just standing outside in silence and looking at each other and having just that little smirk. It was so sweet.
I do love it. Awesome. So that is all about season 3 of Bridgerton with a little bit of book romancing Mr. Bridgerton thrown in there. A bit of a hit and miss type of season, although I will still watch the next season. I'm going to see what they do. If anything, just to understand some of the Easter eggs they put
Okay,
in.
So
I just got to know where they're going.
Here's what I'm going to do. I hope that we are still recording in 2 years when this comes out, but I'm going to let you tell me whether or not to watch it.
I tell you, the writer's strike, I think 2 years in between seasons is way too long. I understand the writer's strike affected so much of their timelines in terms of what they could have been working on while production was happening with season 3 versus, what they're doing now. But these actors are getting older. These actors are getting more, popular. Again, talking about Jonathan Bailey getting booked for so many other jobs. Like, look what happened to Stranger Things. Like, I don't know if Stranger Things is ever going to get its final season because, again, these actors are moving on to other things. The writer's strike moved with their timing. So we're going to see. I am hopeful. I will always give it a chance. I'm not going to judge a showrunner's decision to do certain things without seeing it. Same thing with The Witcher. I loved The Witcher, and now it's Liam Hemsworth. Henry Cavill was perfect in that role, even if the show was far from it. But I'm still going to give it a chance. I will give you a chance before I judge the fuck out of you. And I'm equal opportunity like that. All right, Meg, what are you reading, ranting, or raving about?
I just read a historical. It's old, but I really loved it. I think I've been doing enough Bridgerton that I was like, let me just dive into one more historical that's just totally different. So I'm going to recommend When a Scot Ties the Knot by Tessa Dare. Have you read that one?
I have not, but I really like the alliteration and sounds in the title.
Okay, so Maddie is a wallflower. She's very, very shy. She has some social anxiety. And so when it's time for her to be announced and to go out on the marriage mart, she makes up a boyfriend. And she's like, I went to the beach and I met the Scottish army guy. And this is a Napoleonic Wars. I met this Scottish soldier and we fell in love. But then he got shipped off. His name is Captain Logan, right? and so her family's like, oh, that's wonderful. We're so glad that you met someone who appreciates you. Go write him a letter. And so she writes a letter to Captain Logan McAllister, and she just writes down like Scotland, France, right? Like she just makes up this location and she sends it off, and she sends letters to this made up captain for 5 years. And she writes herself replies from him because she has to pretend that she's in this relationship. And then after 5 years, she writes to him. It's all the first chapter is all epistolary of her writing these letters and being like, isn't this ridiculous? Ha ha ha. Here's a picture of a snail, right? Like she sends it off to war. And then 5 years later, she's like, I'm so sorry, Logan. I have to kill you off. It's time. And so she writes this letter, the last letter, she gets the letter, the news, and then she's like a widower. And some family member gives her a castle up in Scotland to be like, you know what, you passed your time on the marriage mart, now you can just be a spinster. And all she does is she wants to draw illustrations, right? And then
snails.
Yeah, snails and lobsters. Lobsters are really big in this book. And so she gets this castle and she moves up there with her spinster aunt, and they have this really beautiful quiet life. And then one day someone comes to her door, she gets a caller, and
Please
it's Captain Logan McAllister. And there was really a soldier named Logan McAllister. Somehow the letters made their way to him. He kept them all, and all of the people who were in his, like, I don't know, regimen. And he worked his way up to captain because she had written captain on it. He was just like a private when he started getting the letters, and was like, oh, yeah. Captain. And he was like, well, I'll show you. I'm going to be a captain, you know? And so he shows up and he's like, oh, my beloved, it's time to get married because he wants her castle.
I'm going to read this. This sounds fascinating.
That's the prologue in chapter 1 I just wrapped up for you. And then the rest of it is they have like a hand fasting ceremony, but in order to actually be married, they have to consummate the marriage, and they just keep putting it off because she's like, oh, well, I mean, if I just give you the castle, can I leave? And if, you know, like, and it's so sweet.
And it's Tessa Dare. Okay, I'm going to have to read this. This sounds so fun.
And she's so quirky, and he's so like brawny, big man, you know, like it's adorable. It's an adorable little historical.
But with a Scottish accent.
Oh yeah, just a brogue. He's like, I'm gonna be very, very good. You know, just like
oh wow.
So yes, there's my recommendation. And you, Nikki, what are you ranting, raving, or writing?
I am reading there's a new multi-author series that is out. It's actually 2 out right now. I'm just reading the first one. So it's called Fortune Favors the Fae. And it's 15 books, 15 different authors. The only thing in common is this magical coin.
Oh.
And the Fae are somehow involved. So the very first one of the series is by A.J. Sherwood, whom I love as an author. And I need to read you this title because it's hilarious. A Fae coin transported me into another world, and now I'm the gay holy is the first book. It is so funny. It is hysterical. It's really funny because it's like, you know, oh, this person in like our world picks up a coin. It's like, oh, this is weird. And the coin's like, hey, want to go on an adventure? Because he had just broken up with his boyfriend. He like hates his job, and he gets transported over into this new world. And he's just like, oh, this is like, oh my God, I'm in this other world. Like, what the hell? But he ends up in this like kingdom that is not doing well. There's like a mysterious fog that's starting to like encroach, and every time it encroaches, it kills off livestock. So the people in this area are starving. There's no resources. They're not making any money. And it's also a kingdom where a lot of like outcasts come who are from different species. So it's a little bit of like a hodgepodge kind of thing. And of course he falls in love with like the lord of this land who is trying to fix all of it. But this human, he's like, oh, in my previous life, like I was a businessman. So he starts setting up trade agreements, and he goes to the market and he starts doing all these things. He goes, oh, I also have holy powers, and I'm supposed to like get rid of this fog. Yeah, I don't see that happening. But guess what? I'm going to set up a trade agreement. I'm going to negotiate this deal. I'm going to be your gay holy maiden, but we're going to have a service agreement that says I get to have 2 days off per week, and I shan't work more than 12 hours a day. It is so funny. I love it. I've read books the second book in the series, which I believe is by Michelle Notaro, and I think this third one just came out this week. So releasing every week. It's very, very funny. It's very, very funny. I love it. Goes back to like that their last resort, and like the operations professionals getting put into the situation. This is essentially an operations professional joining the Fae world and being like, I'm going to organize this kingdom. Thank you.
Do they have a color-coded filing system? Is a really important question.
He does. He does. It's very, very exciting. All right. Well, y'all, thank you so much for listening. This has been First Dates and Soulmates. You can follow us on social at that same handle. Check out our show notes for all of the books and recommendations that we talked about today.
And for Nikki's random thoughts. We'll just put all of your thoughts in bullet points into the show
all
notes.
My random thoughts. We'll put them in there. Coming up next week, we are kicking off Christmas in July. So stick around for that episode. It's going to be pretty fun. Bye.
Bye.